Americans eat a meal's worth of calories from snack foods almost every day. Does this seem a little bit crazy to you? I don't know. I've reviewed a lot of food logs over the years, and I can tell you in 15 plus years as a health, fitness, and nutrition coach, I've actually seen a lot of people who are getting a lot of snacks relative to their overall meal consumption.
What's up and welcome to Sam Miller Science, where you're joining me just over a decade into my personal journey of working to bridge the gap between metabolism, macros, muscle, and medicine, all while helping coaches scale the impact that they desire and deserve. If you are here, thank you so much for listening and for trusting me to help you elevate your coaching game or to lead you in your transformation to realize your true potential. In either case, each week I'll be sharing my methods, models, and message to serve as leverage for your specific goals. Without further ado, let's get on to today's show.
So today I'm talking about a journal from basically a global public health article by Kristen Heitman talking about snacks contributing considerably to total dietary intakes amongst adults. Now, this is from 2023, and the main concept here is that hyper-palatable snack foods, or what some people would consider to be ultra-processed foods, now note I'm using air quotes if you're not watching on the video, and how these aren't necessarily the best choice for a number of reasons. And one of which is because they cause you to overeat, or it's very easy to overeat. Even if you're going to debate the cause and effect relationship, we know that if snack foods taste good to the human palate and they're very low volume foods compared to maybe some single ingredient whole foods, and they have a lot of calories with not a lot of micronutrient density and antioxidants and essential amino acids, it's going to be very easy to overdo it. Now you might be wondering, so how much are we overdoing it by, or what does this overconsumption actually look like? A new study published by PLOS, Global Public Health, has this information for us, and it might be fairly surprising. This study sought to examine the snacking patterns of Americans divided into those without diabetes, those with pre-diabetes, and those with full-blown type 2 diabetes. So they're basically stratifying the study based on what they call glycemia. And this was either well-controlled or poorly controlled type 2 diabetes. So let's dive into the data that we have and what we can glean from this when it comes to our own health or maybe working with other individuals. This study looked at data over 15 years and 23,000 people in the US. So anytime we have a study and it's looking at a larger sample size, that's great from a nutrition research perspective. And this is 15 years worth. So 15 years is a significant amount of time that we can actually use to see what's going on in terms of these dietary intakes. It is a questionnaire-based study, so it does have its limitations. I'm not going to say this is a perfect form of information gathering, and it's not like a metabolic ward study, but we can still use it to get insights, and I think it's still reflective, just speaking from my anecdotal experience, working in the field for a long period of time, and also, not only did I see food logs and talk to people about their nutrition and see this in the real world. I mean, all you have to do is go to a public area. I'm in airports quite frequently, and you'll see what people are consuming. But even if you go to the grocery store and happen to see someone else's cart, right? So we know that there are some patterns here that you can some of this is common sense and just observation you can see in the real world, but it is nice to actually see a study to substantiate some of this data and have it be based on humans and not necessarily like rodents, right? So when we look at these snacking patterns, I will say this is also reflected in working with countless coaches when I have intake forms to review, or I see nutritional intakes, food logs, or people who are actually tracking their food, even people who think that they're fairly healthy or think that they have a fairly nutritious diet. There's actually a lot of snack foods in there contributing to their total daily calories. And I see this a lot too with people who are experiencing digestive issues or having maybe suboptimal digestion, is maybe they're getting things from a macronutrient perspective and they track their protein, carbs, and fats, but the actual foods that they're choosing to hit those protein, carbs, and fats may be suboptimal. So when examining the snacking patterns of Americans in the United States, the researchers showed that Americans consumed on average 25% of their daily calories from snacks, or about one entire meal's worth. Now this would depend on the size of the person and the size of their meals, but I think this is a pretty fair estimate. Drilling down further into snack choice and what those snacks actually were, you've probably already guessed it from the overall frame of today's episode, but the vast majority were ultra-processed, hyper-palatable sweets or savory snacks. Now, when we combine all of the snacks, 25% of calories worth, and look at the average macronutrient breakdown of these snacks, here's what we see. This extra 25% of calories from snacks is just adding about 6 to 9 grams of protein. That's right, 6 to 9. We didn't even break into double digits in our protein intake. We're not having high protein snacks here for those of you who prefer those foods. Around 70 grams of carbohydrate and 16 grams of fat. Now, they went even further and broke down the micronutrient content of the collective snacking. Just to put this in context, even if you're someone who tries to buy things that are positioned as maybe slightly healthier, or the ingredients are modified in such a way to maybe be less problematic or detrimental, if you were to look at this from a carbohydrate and fat perspective, maybe a bag of chips or something that's maybe more of a rice or corn-based snack, if you have maybe 5 to 7 to 8 grams of dietary fat per serving, you had about 30 or so grams of carbs, and a little bit of protein in there, having about 2 servings of that in terms of snack food is what's going to get you close to those macronutrients. So if you're not super familiar with macronutrients, maybe think of this as, if someone had like 2 quote unquote servings, now most people don't measure their servings, but 2 servings of like Siete chips, and then they also happen to have another handful of carbohydrates somewhere, because even though that would get you to the dietary fat content, you probably need slightly more carbs to hit that overall threshold. But the extra 25% of calories were about 6 to 9 grams of protein, 70 grams of carbs, and 16 grams of fat. And obviously people can hit this a number of ways. This is just the average. They went even further and broke this down in terms of micronutrient content. So not macros, but micros, things like vitamins and minerals. And they looked at the collective snacking. Unsurprisingly, the extra 25% of calories from snacks added anywhere from 0 to 14% to their total daily micronutrient intake, meaning you're getting 25% extra calories, or it's replacing a meal's worth of calories, but it's certainly not replacing a meal's worth of micronutrients compared to something that maybe if you were to cook a meal at home and consume it that way. So ideally, we're looking for a minimum of 25% of the daily value for that micronutrient, since the snacks are making up 25% of the calories, right? Because the way that you get your micronutrients is, assuming, if you didn't have vitamin mineral supplementation at play, you would need that meal to kind of line up with your total daily intake. So as you're eating meal by meal by meal, you're slowly getting closer to those micronutrient totals as you're getting to your macronutrient totals. So think of it almost as like Russian nesting dolls. You have your overall calories and energy intake. In your energy intake, the energy is made up of macronutrients or macros, and those macronutrients ideally contain some micronutrients. So like if you were to consume blueberries, for example, yes, you're getting carbohydrates, but yes, you're also getting micronutrients. If you were to eat lean animal protein, yes, you're getting the protein, but maybe you're also getting zinc or selenium, other vitamins and minerals in that process of taking in those calories. That's not necessarily true of most snack foods. Now, if we take into account the RDAs are lower than they should be for numerous vitamins and minerals, it should probably actually be higher than that, meaning this percentage is skewed even more, and it's making it even harder for people to hit their vitamin and mineral intake. In other words, this study confirms and quantifies what we've known for a long time. Americans are eating a lot of nutrient devoid calories, or very, foods that are high in calories, but we're not really getting enough on the micronutrient side. Or you can think of it as we're overfed, but we're undernourished. So one other point that's worth bringing up in today's show, in today's podcast, is the study also inadvertently shows us the pattern that brings people to diabetes, or kind of walks them down that path. So I'll kind of break this down and explain it for you. When you look at the individual groups, those with normal metabolic health versus those who were pre-diabetic or poorly or well-controlled type 2 diabetes, there's a pattern that emerges when you look at this particular research. In this study, the individuals without diabetes and those with pre-diabetes actually ate higher snack calories than those people with diabetes. Compared to the average I mentioned earlier, those with diabetes, poorly controlled or not, were eating about 19% of their total daily calories from snacks. So the data visualizes the fact that when there isn't a health crisis present, people do go pretty hard on their snacks. And that's not to say that you can't ever eat snacks, or that you're not going to figure it in as part of, think of it as people will do things to balance out their financials or their budget. If they have an energy budget, which would be made up of food and calories and macronutrients, and then in those macros we should be getting micros. If someone occasionally wants to include some snack foods, or they have things they enjoy, that's one thing. But oftentimes when we do this repeatedly, 7 days a week, all the time, we're not getting enough animal proteins, we're not getting enough fruits and vegetables, or single ingredient carbohydrate sources, or healthy fats. So think instead of more of a Mediterranean style of eating or single ingredient whole food matrix, which I've done several podcasts in my audio feed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you are watching the video and you're less familiar with my content, I have episodes on single ingredient foods. I have episodes on the whole food matrix, understanding antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. So definitely check that out if you're newer here, and you can grab hundreds of episodes on audio over there on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, many other platforms as well, things like more of the Amazon channel for podcasts, also on things like Overcast. So there are many, many, many podcast apps, but I would say Spotify and Apple Podcasts probably the most popular. If you're on audio and you want to check out some of the videos, check out the channel. It's at Sam Miller Science on YouTube. So compared to the average we talked about, right? So some of these folks are in more of the diabetic population are actually eating less of their total percentage of calories from snacks. So the data visualizes the fact that if you think you're pretty healthy or you don't have this diagnosis, some people are still doing a little too much snacking relative to their meals, right? And maybe some of our snacks should just be like smaller meals if we are going to have a snack, and maybe that would go further from a nutrient perspective and managing our appetite. So as we're wrapping up today's show, just realize this could be a very, very easy place to look for low-hanging fruits, especially if you are working with clients. So if you're a nutrition coach, if you're a fitness coach, if you're a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach, CrossFit coach, whatever the case may be, even if you're someone who's more on the medical side of things and people ask you nutrition questions, consider snack foods as pretty low-hanging fruit for your clients and understand the ramification of that. I will also say some of these foods that have a lot of ingredients in them and they're not very nutrient dense from a micronutrient perspective, but have a lot of calories, those multi-ingredient foods sometimes are the culprit for unexplained digestive issues. So whether it's packaged snacks, bars, etc., those can contribute to people's digestive distress. So sometimes pulling those out for a period of time and then reintroducing certain foods can be really helpful if someone's struggling. Many clients brand new to anything health or nutrition related may not be ready to weigh, measure, or count macros meticulously. But I will say it's a lot easier to overeat something you find in the middle of the grocery store than it is to overeat like a very protein dense food or, for example, single ingredient carbohydrates. You know, berries, for example, serving sizes are very, very, very large versus if you were to grab something that's like chips or pretzels, etc., very easy to overdo it there. So unless someone has a very, very high total daily energy expenditure, it becomes so easy to out-eat what you're actually expending in terms of calories. So it's not that these foods can't ever make an appearance, but when they do, it can be pretty problematic, especially for people who aren't really monitoring their intake in any other way. It may be beneficial at the start, so especially if you're trying to help people with their nutrition, to tackle any of these identified sort of suspects in question. So to me, this would mean things that have a laundry list of ingredients, things are very calorically dense, not contributing a lot of vitamins and minerals. So liquid sugar is another big one. So people who are consuming, soda, for example, this is going to contribute to what would be more of like snack calories versus meal calories, even though it is more of a beverage. So, looking at calorie containing beverages, looking at condiments, looking at these multi-ingredient snack foods can be a way to help get intake under control if someone's having a hard time in terms of overeating. It's a perfect example. So many times a client thinks they can adhere. So sometimes just developing a simple heuristic of no snacking between meals can cut down calories significantly, or maybe there's just a certain part of the day where it's like, this is my snack and I have an idea of what this is. Maybe we need to be in a place where we're managing appetite first before someone can dive in on those foods. Or I've seen people who find success with, going with like a single serving versus if you have a huge bag of something, right? It's so easy to keep going back to that, reaching in and overeating those calories. So looking at this, there's a few different angles. One, there's obviously the caloric intake portion. Two, not just the percentage of calories, but what percentage of micronutrients are coming in when we're having these foods. Number three is sometimes unexplained digestive issues and gut health complications can come from the overconsumption of snack foods relative to meals that are made up of single ingredient whole foods. Another thing is just, once again, give a quick look or glance at those liquid calories and see if that's something that maybe needs to be attended to in order to optimize overall nutrient intake. Now, inside this episode, talked about a lot of different topics. If you're someone who's interested in learning more kind of the beginner to intermediate side of nutrition, I would check out Metabolism Made Simple, Making Sense of Nutrition to Transform Metabolic Health. That is my book. And you can learn more about that either on my website or metabolismmadesimple.com. If you're someone who's interested in more of the intermediate to advanced aspects of nutrition, micronutrition, understanding someone's progression of insulin resistance and what was going on here, maybe even for these folks, whether it was folks eating the snack food or moving more towards a type 2 diabetic state, and what does that mean from a biochemistry or physiology perspective, and you're wanting to better understand nutrition through that lens, I'd encourage you to check out my nutrition and metabolism specialization program, very lifestyle and health optimization oriented, taking a nutrition and movement centered approach to improving individuals' overall health. So this is designed for health, fitness, and nutrition professionals. We're looking to bridge that gap between macros, metabolism, muscle, and medicine. And so if that sounds like you, head over to metabolismschool.com to learn more. If you enjoyed today's episode and appreciated the fact that I didn't inundate you with tons of different ads and you're able to kind of get the information and get out, the best way to support my team and I would be to leave a 5-star rating and review on audio, or if you're listening on watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, show some support. A lot of you guys have tuned into individual videos and you've viewed those videos but haven't subscribed. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and give it a thumbs up or comment. That's very supportive for the algorithm and kind of lets me know that you're listening. And I always like to thank you guys directly. If you're on the audio, screenshot it and tag me in your Instagram stories. I'm at Sam Miller Science. I know that there's someone in your life who needs this information, whether it's a client, whether it's your followers, whether it's potentially a friend or family member. I know I have family members who could probably benefit from some of this advice. So let's pay it forward and continue the ripple effect of coaching with the world. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you in the next show.